Okay, welcome to the second chapter. And today we are going to start looking at verbs in a more systematic fashion. Because in the first lesson, we had some isolated inflected forms. Now we want to look at what what is actually behind these distinctions in the forms that we see. Okay, so in a very vague sense, we can put the Mari verbs fall into two conjugation classes. And those of you that have studied Hungarian in particular need to be careful now that these conjugation classes, this is a classification of verbs. Each verb belongs to the one conjugation class or to the other conjugation class. It is not a thing where you can conjugate one verb after the other, after the one class or the other. Here I've given you some examples of verbs that fall into the two conjugation classes. And if I have them here nicely separated in bubbles showing the verbal stems, in the book we only introduced the verbal stems in chapter 6, but I find it useful to already be aware of them at a fairly early stage. Wait, is my audio gone? Or can people hear me?
Not it's back now for me. I can hear fine. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I don't know what was going on there.
It was probably the first 15 or 20 seconds.
Okay. Yeah, I'm making a local recording on my computer, so I'm hoping that you won't, that it'll be on there in the recording. I'll see afterwards. Okay. So I find it useful to already be aware of verbal stems when we start looking at these conjugation classes. And if we put them, if we now here put them into these two bubbles, we can immediately see that a distinction that we have, that in the first conjugation class, the verbal stems all end in consonants or in the vowels of u and ü. I have no idea if there's a historical dimension to this, but like in Turkic, in some Turkic languages, U and Ü are actually, stems ending in U and Ü are treated as consonant stems. And I think the explanation, Reka can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the explanation given there is that there is assumed to be a little glide at the end after the U. That it's like often transcribed as UW or UW, and that it thus behaves like a consonant in inflection. And while in the second conjugation class, there the stems all end in e, o, or ö, an unstressed final vowel. And we can see that they look, some of them, they're looking somewhat similar. If we have kod to stay and kodo to leave something behind, the same distinction you have between like Finnish jäädä and jättä. We have shinch here to sit down and shinsha to sit. These are obviously related forms that we have. Muralt to be sung, muralte to sing a little bit. Yeah, we're going to look at the relationship between these two forms. A common question that often comes at this point is like, how common are these conjugation classes? I've looked at this numerically, and roughly 1/3 of stems fall into or in the first conjugation class, and 2/3 of stems are in the second conjugation class. So it's so the second conjugation class is more widely used, but the margins are not you need both equally, especially since so much of the core vocabulary is in the first conjugation class. So if we look at these pairs of verbs, what the relationship of these two each other is. So with kod and with kodo, here we have a distinction that we have very similar stems where one of them is intransitive and one of them is transitive. And the tendency is, if you have these pairs of related stems, that the first conjugation one is intransitive and the second conjugation one is transitive. Sometimes we will have a distinction where the first conjugation verb is static, like to sit, and the corresponding second conjugation verb. Sorry, no, the errors are the wrong way around. I need to fix this. I'm sorry. That the first conjugation verb is transformative and the second one is static, just giving a status of it, that you sit down, you sit. It's Aktionsart is the difference between the two. Here, if we have murat and muralte, the key here is that these are both derived verbs, both from the same stem, muro, to sing, with derivational suffixes. And one of them, alt, is a derivational suffix that reduces the valency of the verb, so it makes that it can be reflexive or passive or impersonal, depending on the exact context. And here the trend continues that the first conjugation is associated weakly with intransitive aspects. And like murat, to be sung, this is now we made an intransitive verb of a transitive verb with this passive derivation. Whereas this alte, the momentary derivation, doing something a little bit, this does not change the valency of a verb, and muralte, to sing a little bit, is still just as transitive as the counterpart. So again, here we have as with the codo pair, the second conjugation is more transitive than the first conjugation. But one cannot abstract entire roots from this. Okay, so like in tolo, to come, tolo, to steal. Here, these are not related stems. This is just a coincidence that they are so similar. And here, tolo is the intransitive one, and tolo is the transitive one, and tol is the intransitive one. So this rule of thumb holds here. But then we have pushed, to kill, in the first conjugation, and male, to sleep, in the second conjugation, where the first conjugation has something that is like as transitive as verbs come, and male then a strongly intransitive verb. So these are all just tendencies that often enough the relationship between these two classes, it's arbitrary, and you just have to learn which conjugation class a verb belongs to. Now we're coming to an unfortunate aspect of this whole system, and that is, okay, so if we, so let's try attaching some suffixes to this stem. And we can start by having like the active participle, which has the ending she, sho, she, depending on vowel harmony. We already know this. We had this in tunekto, the teacher. That's from the stem tunekto, to teach the active participle of that. And if we take this she, sho, she, and we attach it to verbal stems, we will have here kot, to stay, becomes kotcho. Shinchash, to sit down, becomes shitshe. This consonant cluster, shinche, would not be allowed in Mari phonotactics, so the consonant cluster is simplified a bit. Murat gets muralche, tol becomes tolsho, push becomes pushcho. If in the second conjugation class, however, we attach the same, the shesho she to the stem, kodo, to leave, becomes kodesho. Shinche, to sit, becomes shinche, muralteshe, tolasho, malashe. So you see that where we had these similar stems, they did not look identical yet. Kocho, kodesho, shinche, shinche, muralteshe, muralteshe. We're close, but we're not at exactly the same spot yet. However, if we now were to attach the infinitive ending ash to the stems, the infinitive ending ash deletes unstressed final vowels that precede it, the way other suffixes ending with starting with an a do. We'll see a few other ones of those. So if we attach this ash, if we attach it to kot, we get to kodash. If we attach it to shinch, we get shinchash, muraltash, tolash, pushtash. Now we attach it to kodo, and it deletes the o, and we have kodash, shinchash, muraltash, tolash. Suddenly, these verbs that had different stems look the same. And this makes it highly unfortunate that it is the infinitive of all forms that is used as the dictionary forms of Mari verbs. But it is what it is. We have to live with this. But you as students, if you as students don't want to live with this, learn verbs according to some other inflectional form. For example, the first person singular indicative present. Kodam, kodem. We're going to see that in a moment. The infinitive is, in this sense, the worst, but okay. So here we see we're over the next 3 lessons, we are going to be learning the inflectional forms in pairs of 2. So 2 inflectional endings per session. I've given you the whole paradigm here in gray. Whenever in my slides I have something in gray, this means I'm giving you the information, but it is not yet expected in this level of the textbook. It's not going to occur in the text in the exercises at this point. Or if it does, then it is with some note of some sort. Yeah, 1 moment. Check. So, something, so here are just 2 regular verbs. There is nothing but regular verbs in Mari, but we're going to look at a few forms, well, at a few verbs that orthographically look a bit tricky. They are different, the endings are different in all persons. So it's like with sitting down, it's shin cham, shin chat, shin chesh, shin chana, shin chada, shin chit. Careful here, the stress is here on the first syllable because this ending does not receive stress. Whereas if I have shincha to sit, I have shinchem, shinchet, shincha, shinchena, shincheda, shinchat. Okay, so you have to find some way to memorize this, the jumping back and forth between a and e. Because often some sources of Mari call this conjugation, the first conjugation, the a conjugation, and this one the a conjugation, based on which vowel occurs in the first person singular. But the third person singular always shows the other vowel. In the first conjugation, we have an a in the third person singular, and in the second conjugation, we have an a. So it's jumping back and forth. Okay, but so verbs where students at an early stage can think that they are irregular. Oh yeah, sorry, before I do that, here's the same thing now in Finno-Ugristik transcription, the whole paradigm, which is going to become relevant in a moment. So here are 2 verbs where students at an early stage might consider them irregular. Li, to be or to become, and kaye, to go. Where I then have liam, liat, liesh, liena, lieda, liet. Where sometimes I have this ya, the backwards R looking letter, and sometimes I have just an I and a ye, and then I have the y written explicitly in the plural forms. And the second conjugation, kayash, we have kayem, to go, kayash, kayem, kayet, kaya, kayena, kayeda, kayat. We have here also this ya appearing in the third person singular and plural, and it looks a bit, it looks sporadic at first. But the reason why I had the transcription in the first example, if we now look at this in transcription, we'll see there is nothing actually irregular here. The endings are exactly the same as they are everywhere else. Liam, liat, liesh, liena, lieda, liet. Kayem, kayet, kaya, kayena, kayeda, kayat. It's the exact endings we had in the so-called regular verb. So what's happening here is just that the orthography is a bit annoying. There's nothing irregular about the verbs. It's just you need to get used to, if they look irregular to you, you need to get used some more to the Mari orthography. Same is if I look at now verbs with like shu, to arrive, and puo, to give, of shuam, shuat, shuesh, shuana, shueda, shuet. And with puash, puem, puet, pua, puena, pueda, puat, the backwards E that we always have, the backwards E here. We need this because otherwise it would be shuyesh, puyem, puyet. We need the backwards E to show that there is no y sound, but there is not actually anything irregular here either. Okay, about the verbal forms that we are, so right now we are looking at the present tense forms of verbs, an indicative, affirmative, so positive, and it's not imperative or anything like that. That's all still coming. I wrote here present future with future in parentheses because this is what the Maris call it. The Maris call it the present future tense because this tense is used both in reference to present circumstances and in reference to future circumstances. Rika is asking, is a second type more derived verbs? Tendentially, I want to say yes, but this is something that one can learn from derivational suffix to derivational suffix, that every that every derivational suffix will create verbs of either the one conjugation class or the other. And my gut feeling is that more derivational suffixes form verbs of the second conjugation, but I would have to check this numerically. There are some highly productive ones that form verbs of the first conjugation class. Like there's a derivational suffix m to become something, and that is in first conjugation. Like if we have sai, good, sayem, sayemash is then to become good, to be improved, or so, and that's then first conjugation. But then if I derive, if I put a transitivizing suffix on that, a d, and this is something that we have throughout the Ugristik language family, and make sayem dash of this to improve something, transitive. That's second conjugation, and because it's transitivizing d forms verbs of the second conjugation. In a few, like in chapter 6, we're going to learn, we're going to meet the imperative and the co-negative form, where which is basically the simple stem with a few select stem simplifications. And when we get to that stage, we can also learn some things about how sometimes the phonotactics can tell us which conjugate that a verb cannot belong to the first conjugation class, because it would not be possible to pronounce this a stem that ends in this consonant cluster without violating the rules of Mari phonotactics. But we'll get back to that. Okay, so wanted to just quickly look at these the present future tense, what verbs that occur in this tense, if we want to translate them into English, for example, how we would do this. If I have, for example, tudo pertamesta, she, he, they are building a house or making a house. I could translate this in English either by saying she builds a house or she is building a house, because this the simple continuous distinction that English has. In the present tense, Mari does not have any such distinctions. In the past tense, we do have some distinctions that do sort of border a bit on aspect, but we'll get to that much later. But it could also mean he or she or they will build a house. So it can be in reference to future circumstances. Yeah, this is not unusual for Ugristik languages. There is a verb to begin, which can be used as an auxiliary, but it is comparatively rare. Rika asked, it would be interesting if deverbal denominal makes a difference too. Yeah, but a lot of these derivational suffixes actually can be attached both to verbal stems and to nominal stems. And it doesn't, in that there, it does not make a difference on the conjugation class. Okay, I'm back. So if we're looking at a sentence like tudo pertamesta, she, he, they make build a house, and we want to turn this, we want to translate this into English. We can have either she builds a house, she is building a house, because we do not have this simple continuous distinction that we have in English. In the present tense and more, you have nothing that corresponds to it. In the past tense, it's a bit more complicated. We'll get to that, because we do have multiple past tenses and the relationship between these. Again, can you hear me?
Yeah,
you're back.
Just froze for a moment, but you're back.
Okay. Okay.
Should we try to switch off the video connection, because sometimes that was the problem.
Yeah.
With
True. Okay.
Everyone but me turn off the video. Yeah. The good news is, I think the good news is that I am moving in a few weeks, and I am no longer going to be having the same internet provider that I have now, which is horrible. Okay. So hopefully in the new year, I should have a more reliable connection. Okay, so in the past tense, there are some cases where we have something that almost corresponds to the English simple continuous distinction, but we'll get back to that. And please remember that I said almost. It's not a 100% correspondence. But it could also be that she will build a house sometime in the future. It depends on context. here's another thing. This is a fairly recent Russian influence, probably. If we say Nuno gazetam užalat, it means they sell or are selling newspapers or will sell newspapers, depending on context. If I leave away the Nuno, the pronoun they, then gazetam užalat usually is more understood as newspapers are being sold, that it is an impersonal construction. This is like in Russian, if you've ever done some Russian, the kak vas zovут construction, what are you called? What is literally asked in Russian is, what do they, in parentheses, call you? The pronoun is not actually used there. And this works in Mari too, then. And it's somewhat similar to the German Mann construction, Mann verkauft Zeitung. So, okay, so now it's time to look at some cases. We're gonna meet two new cases today, and the first one is the accusative in M. And I have the same categories that we had last week when we were looking at the inessive. And basically, if you know how to form the inessive, you know how to form the accusative, because the rules are pretty much the same with just attaching the suffix to it, where you need then a linking vowel and where you don't. The only difference you have is something that I didn't actually mention yet last week, which we are going to look at later, is that in the inessive, if you have stems ending with sh, you sometimes have short forms, like yaratamash, love, in love, for example, in inessive would be yaratamashte, not yaratamashishte. There's a so-called haplology here that the shush is pulled together as one, as a sh. But okay, so accusative M, and we want to attach it to different words. Okay, I forgot something at the beginning of this lesson because today's the day that everything breaks on me, and that is I forgot to ask who wants to participate in exercises. Giving you a link here. If you want to participate in the exercises this week, please click on the link and enter your name at the top of the document. Or say in the chat, if you don't want to open a Google Docs document, say in the chat, I want me or so. And then I'll know to call on you. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'll try to remember to do this at the beginning of the class next week. Okay, I think I have the list in. One moment. Okay, so we can again make the rough categorizations that we can have words ending in a stressed vowel, words ending in a consonant, and words ending in an unstressed a, o, and ö. Basically, you attach the M to the stem. You have a linking vowel if you need it. If you don't have a linking vowel, and unstressed final a, o. And that's basically it. So let's go through these thing where the words where you see the nominative and you give me the accusative. Hola, Kevin.
Hola, olam.
Mm-hmm. Then Sonia.
Basso, bassum.
Mm-hmm. Samo?
Chenge, chengem.
This was only very slight, but you very slightly did something that a lot of people who have studied Russian do, is that you do a slight palatalization of the t. You don't want to do that in Mari. That's really, it's neither palatalized nor aspirated.
Okay.
Tenge. Yeah, then Valentina?
Kutu, kutum.
Right. Jukka?
Sat, sudden.
Yep. Zoli?
Verum.
Yep. Adam?
Kidim.
Very nice. And you also, the pronunciation was absolutely correct that here it's kit with a T actually in pronunciation, but then here it is voiced kidum. Sandra?
Mutum.
Yep. Then Luan?
Patum.
Yep. Mika?
Wudem.
Yep. And here again, we heard it, that it's wüt, wüdem. And this is something that like German speakers and Russian speakers get this right usually because they're used to final consonant voicing. And Mari, historically, it's the exact other way around, but who cares right now. Then Sophus?
Ketchem.
Yep. Then Gopal?
Tumo. Tumom.
Yep. And I'll do the last one, Körge, Körgem. Okay, so this is nice and easy, and things stay nice and easy when we look at the genitive case with the ending N, because the formation is exactly the same, just that you use an N instead of an M. So I'm not going to go through and practice this all. We can do this already. So, one moment. Just this is a little note for those of you who have studied Finnish. So if we compare Mari and Finnish, and we take let's first we can start with a word that is cognate in these two languages. Finnish jalka and Mari jol. So in Finnish, the genitive and the accusative have basically fallen together in all person they have fallen together everywhere but in the pronominal system where we have separate accusative forms. So if I have jalka, when I look at Finnish at the genitive, it's jalan, and the accusative is jalan. So so the genitive, this is nice and this expected. We have an N both in Finnish and in Mari, but then in Finnish we have in the accusative we have an N in Finnish and an M in Mari. But it's important to note that it's Finnish that is being weird here, because originally the Mari version that we have here is the original version. What happened is, and we can see what happened if we look at Finnish Finnish nouns, like all the nouns in the avain declension group. So if we have avain, a key, and look at that in genitive, the genitive of avain is Sonia, maybe?
Avaimen.
Avaimen. Suddenly we have an M appearing on us. Sorry, no, my battery is running out because everything is. Okay, and yeah, so accusative, we don't have the distinction. So what we see here is that in Finnish we had a sound change that M, an original M became an N at the end of a syllable. So we used to, in pre-Proto-Finnic, we used to have an accusative in M and a genitive in N, but then you had the sound change that final M becomes N, and the two fell together. And like to the outside of very new loanwords and names, Finnish doesn't allow for an M in syllable final position. It's word final position. Finnish phonotactics basically ensure that these two cases fall together, but in Mari they remain distinct. Okay, Then we're also looking at possessive suffixes, specifically of the third person singular and plural. I've already given you here the first and second person forms that we are going to be meeting in the next 2 weeks. I'm going to start with the possessive suffix of the third person plural, which is st or ist. And you can get this by exactly the same means by which you get the inessive, just without the final e or ö. So I'm not going to practice it, it's too trivial. Olasht, pasust, tengesht, kutusht, sadisht. Here we need a linking vowel, verdisht, kidisht, etc. And with stems that have a final e or ö that is unstressed, that is reduced, and kechisht, tumisht, kurgisht. The possessive suffix third person singular, on the other hand, is the most complex suffix in Mari. This is not a gut feeling. This I know from my work on morphological analyzers and morphological generators. This is the one that, like, half the time you spend on creating a morphological generator for Mari is spent on the possessive suffix third person singular. This is not to say that it is very bad. It's just difficult by Mari standards, which is still not very difficult. So we have here the alternation between e or ö, and we have an alternation between je and sh. And after vowels, the e or ö of the suffix is optional and can be omitted in many cases. So let's do another round with these one. I'm going to do the first one. If I have ola, then it would be olage, or would have the short form olage. But okay, I had the wrong way around in the slides actually. That in the consonants we have to make another distinction between consonant stems that end in a sonorant consonant, that is y, m, r, n, ny, n, l, and l, and those that end in an obstruent consonant, that is to say a fricative or a spirant, affricate, or a plosive. So, k, d, s, z, ch. And basically only after these do we have the variant with a sh. Okay, so ola will have olage or olage, the short form. Then Kelvin.
Pasu, pasuje.
Can you say that again?
Pasu, pasuje. Pasujo.
Pasujo, exactly. The vowel harmony. You have to pay attention here that it is the last full vowel that determines the vowel harmony. That's the u in this case. And the a becomes completely irrelevant if you have the u already dictating the terms of vowel harmony here. Then Sonia?
Tengej.
Yep. With the a being optional here. And then Samo?
Kutu, and then kutuju, kutuju.
Exactly. Then Valentina?
Ver, verige.
Can you say it again slowly?
Ver, je.
You do not, I'm not sure if I'm hearing it right here, but you do not need a linking vowel here.
Okay. So no, it was incorrect. Verge.
Yeah. Verge. And
Verge.
important here is that you do not, that here the a cannot be dropped, because just verge would not be viable. So then Yuka?
Chonjo.
Chonjo, yeah. Zoli?
Udur, udurje.
Can you say that again?
Udurje.
I'm not happy with the vowel harmony.
Udurje.
Udurje, exactly, because the is not a full vowel, and thus it is, in this case, irrelevant for the vowel harmony. Since the is not a full vowel, the responsibility for the vowel harmony jumps one vowel back to the u. Good. Then Adam?
Pert and Pertje.
Pertje, exactly. Sandra?
Kagashe.
Kagashe, exactly.
with a z. Okay.
With a z. Yeah. That I would guess that in pronunciation that there is some assimilation here, that it is pronounced as kagashe, but I'm not 100% sure. But in any case, this is definitely how it is realized orthographically. Okay, and then Luan gets the really difficult one with le stash.
Le stash and le stasche.
So le stasche is one possibility, but there is also another possibility. And that is le stasche. That just here, just after sh, it is permissible to have a linking vowel, and it is actually common. So this is what Valentina tried to do with ver. After ver, it wouldn't happen. After an r, this doesn't happen. But after a sh, sometimes they do. That like le stasche, what I have in parentheses here, it does occur, but usually the Maoris put in a linking vowel and have it as le stasche here. Okay, the last three are easy cheesy lemon squeezy. Mikke?
Ketche, ketche.
Yes. Sophos?
Tumo, tumosho.
Exactly. And Gopal?
Kyrge, kyrge.
Exactly. Okay, so as I said, it's a bit annoying, but this Mari morphology is not going to get worse than this. That I can promise. That this is you're at the peak of difficulty with this suffix. Okay. Then just about the ordering of possessive suffixes and case suffixes. This is something worth looking into. If you are coming from Finnish or Hungarian, you might be used to the ordering being exactly one way. That we have, the Hungarian system where you first have a possessive suffix and then have a case suffix, and the Finnish system where you first have a case suffix and then have a possessive suffix. Mari does not make life quite this easy here. That we can basically, outside of the nominative, distinguish three groups. And gray are the cases we have not met yet, but we are going to meet very soon. The first group with the genitive, the accusative, and the so-called conjugative, which is not the usual thing to say with in Mari. It has a very specialized function, and don't try to use it yet, please. Here we follow the Hungarian system of having first a possessive suffix and then having a case suffix. And I know this is not at all useful for people that have not done neuralic studies. For the initive, the illative, and the lative, the three local cases, here we use the Finnish system of first having the case suffix and then having the possessive suffix. And the third group, in the third group, both arrangements work. You can have first the possessive suffix, then the case suffix, or the other way around. And the factors governing this are going to be somewhere in the level of information structure and have not yet been adequately explained. Though there is a dissertation looking at the distribution of these patterns from Jorma Lutonen, published in 1997. But this would definitely be something that should be revisited with a corpus at some point. Good. Let's have a quick look at possessive constructions in Mari, and this is something where people who have studied Finnish and people who have studied Hungarian both have to fight instincts that they bring from their native languages. So typically, possessive construction, if we have a possessive construction in a language, most languages have either mark a possessive relationship on the possessor. Like in Estonian, if I say Minu Maja, my house, it's Minu is in the genitive and Maja is just nominative, no marking. My house, and I've marked on me that this is a possessive, that there's a possessive relationship between me and the house. In Hungarian, on the other hand, you do not have a genitive, but instead you use possessive suffixes that you place on the possessed to indicate the relationship between two things. So if I say like Peter's house in Hungarian, I would say Peter house and then house with the possessive suffix third person singular. Mari does both, and Mari does both consistently. Finnish allows people to do both, but rarely does it actually happen, especially in spoken language. in Mari, you have like, if you have Yelun ergische, Yelu son, you have the genitive on Yelu and the possessive suffix on the son, and you optimally should always have both. The possessive suffix can, in theory, be omitted, but it is not that common. The genitive cannot be omitted. Hungarian-style possessive constructions are not grammatical in Mari. Or Sergin Üderje, Sergei's daughter. One thing to know, if you have Yelu and Sergen, you're chashed. Yelu and Sergei's child. Here, the genitive ending just goes on the second element of this thing, because what Yelu and Sergei, what it historically actually is den is with. So it is with Yelu Sergei. And thus you didn't have Sergei as the head of the whole phrase, and it gets the case marking. Yeah, also it works the same with pronoun possessors. If I have like Tuden Vatuje or Nunen Jochasht. And I can also have chains of possessors. Like if I have here, it's like my father's little brother. So I have me in the genitive, then father, a possessive suffix to indicate the relationship to me, my father, and then genitive because of him, the little brother. So, yeah. Oh, and this is sort of blocked out here. And another thing just to be aware of is if I have Acharge and Ergische, father and son, I can have here possessive suffixes on both, that I can have a reciprocal relationship where both elements in the pairing are both possessor and possessed. Because it's the father's son and the son's father. It works both ways in this particular pairing. Okay, this gets us now to the habeo constructions. How do you say that you have something in Mari? So last week we were looking at the Pope and Stephen Hawkins discussing the existence of God, where you could say Yumo Ulo, God, there is God. Yes, it is very Turkic. This is generally like this double marking of the possessive relationship is considered a Turkic influence, that you use it so consistently. Wait, Sonia's saying?
Jeremy, I have a question about that.
Yeah.
Double possession marker. So like in that father and son construction, so is the je like compulsory? Like can it not be like without the possessive suffixes?
Good question. My feeling is that the first one is optional, that you could have Acha den Ergische, father and the child. But you do encounter this a lot, that you have a two-way relationship. This is something that I would want to look in the corpus before I make two bold statements about it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, but we can get back to it. Write in the Discord channel, and then I can, if you write in the Discord channel, I can look up in the corpus what I find and share my findings. Okay, and somebody says, I'm not sure when Finnish, only the construction name plus applet no suffix is possible, item coil, but you can say her dog, Hanan coil on site. Yeah, okay, that's true. I got my Finnish mixed up here a bit. But then in more, yeah, because like in Finnish, you could say like minun nimeni, I believe, like my name with both genitive of I and then possessive suffix first person singular. And you sometimes learn this in textbooks, but you don't actually hear this in the wild very often. Okay. So back to the habeo construction. Okay, yeah. See you then when you have to leave, Adam. And I'm hoping that the recordings are at least working with everything else that is failing today. If the recordings are completely screwed up, I'm going to re-record it on my own in a fast process after having fixed all my technical problems. Okay, so last week we were looking at the Pope and Stephen Hawkins debating the existence of God. Yumo Ulo, God exists. There is a God. Yumo Uke, there is not a God. Okay, but what if we are now moving on towards they're no longer discussing the existence of a God, but they are discussing what they own. And for example, the Pope has his own church and he wants to say, I have a church, and Stephen Hawkins wants to say, well, I don't have a church. You basically use the same construction you have before, just with a possessive suffix. Cercem ulo, it literally means my church exists, and that, but what is communicated with that is, I have a church. This is the standard way of doing it, and this is also very Turkic. And then you have the counterpart with uke. If you say cercem uke, my church does not exist, that is then I don't have a church. Okay, as we will see in some of these examples, that especially if we have a quantifier or numeral of some sort, like if we say that Sergei has 2 children, Sergei COPIUS Charge ulo. Especially if you have a quantifier, the ulo is often omitted. But if you have like in this case here, we don't have a quantifier when we say Yeluden Sergei Yochasht. There, the Mari native speakers also thought that works fine without the ulo. It would be better with it, but don't actually need it. In this case, there, if we say like Yelun Mashinage, if you just end the sentence after Yelun Mashinage, then this just sounds like Yelu's car. And then you wonder, yeah, what about Yelu's car? Where's the additional information coming? Okay. Any questions about the whole aspect of possessive constructions, possessive suffixes, genitive, and accusative before we go on to other topics? That's a cool note. Summer, you mean the whole system with to be and with the possessive construction?
Yeah, where you can drop the existential verb. I mean, we don't have like possessive suffixes, we have genitives, but other than that, it's the same.
Yeah. And how does it work with to have? Does Bengali have a to have verb, or is it a particle of some sort?
Yeah, no to have verbs in like any language as far as aware. It's either like a dative construction, to me exists, or like in the East, like in Bengali, it's like my exists.
Okay, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and Gopal mentions it's the same in Tamil. Yeah. I mean, this is also like this particular XYZ exists is very widespread in the Turkic languages. You do that the same way. Udmurt does it very similar. It's not universal even in Eastern Uralic languages, because then the Ob-Ugric languages like Mansi has a to have verb again, and then so okay. Okay, I think I'll move on into the next topic unless there are any additional questions.
I have a question, Jeremy.
Yeah.
It's Yeluden Sergen Yochasht Ulo.
Yeah.
I just wonder if, well, the English equivalent is children, and the Mari sentence has got a singular form. So does it make any difference, or do they mean by even by using singular, they mean plural, or?
Generally speaking, in Mari does not use nominal plural suffixes much at all. Basically, you only use the plural suffixes when, let me put this another way. You do not use plural suffixes when a pluralic reading of a noun seems more intuitive in a sentence. Of course, what is intuitive and not is highly culturally dependent, and not always transparent to us as outsiders. But in this particular case, if you ask, do Yelu and Sergei have children, and you're working from a no information base, usually you would ask, the question would be understood as, even with like a grammatical singular form, if they have children. Because if I want to ask, do they have one child? Of course, it's a less natural thing to ask, but if I really wanted to, I could ask Yelu and Sergei ik yochasht ulo. Do Yelu and Sergei have one child? So this is the kind of thing. Yes, it is grammatically singular. It looks singular, but pretty consistently, Mars will, if they translate this into Russian, for example, they will use plural forms in Russian.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So that's Kelvin has the right translation. Do Yelu and Sergei have a non-zero number of children? Yeah. Okay, so Okay, something where we can have an exercise again. So we've met the cardinal numbers, and now we're doing the ordinal numbers. The ordinal numbers are formed with the suffix umshe, umsho, umshö, attached to the short form of the cardinal number. The only thing you have to be careful of is that if the short form of the cardinal ends with an M, there's a so-called haplology. A haplology is if you have a repeating structure in a word that it is pulled, that it is abbreviated. A very good example from German is that if you have like a magician, a male magician is a Zauberer, and a female magician would like more the productive way of forming this would be Zaubererin, but that's not actually what it is. It's Zauberin. This is RR is drawn together to because it's redundant information. I'm sure there's some good examples in English too. I can't think of any. If somebody can think of good haplologies from English, please mention it now.
But isn't it something with like metal and metallurgy? No, that's German too, I think.
Metallurgy, yeah, could be. Yeah. Could be. Well, one, I just did one, this, like, it's called a haplology, but when linguists are being extra funny, they will call it haplology. Nothing better than linguists being funny, isn't there? Okay.
There is the English possessive, right? Like if like Jesus says it becomes Jesus.
Oh yeah, right.
The possessive suffix drops after S.
Yeah. Okay. So be mindful of the haplology when we form our ordinal numbers. So we'll start with Kelvin.
Ikamshe.
Yep. Sonja.
Kokumsho.
Yep. Samo.
Kumshe.
Vowel harmony.
Kumsho.
Exactly. Then Valentina.
Nilimshe.
Yeah. Then Yuka has to be careful again about something else, but Yuka.
I'm just wondering what I have to be careful of.
Okay.
Oh, the chi, I think the che, it changes.
Yes, exactly.
But to what?
Same thing you have in the long form of this numeral.
Visumshe.
Visumshe, exactly. So this is just, Mari historically did not allow for a z in the final position, and it became ch. So vis historically would not have been a valid word in Mari. I say historically because we have some loan words that are already somewhat older that do have this, like kagaz, paper, an originally Persian word where it did not become kagach. But if Mari had received this loan word a few hundred years earlier, it would have become kagach most probably. Okay, Zoli.
Kudimsho.
Yeah, I think Adam has left, so Sandra.
Shimshe?
Shimshe, correct. So here is the second one where we have the haplology. Now I have to be careful not to be accidentally funny, because I've heard this joke so often that haplology sounds natural to me. Okay, Luan.
Kandashimshe.
Yep. Mikke.
Indeshimshe.
Yep. And then Sophus.
Lumshe.
This is a bit tricky, that usually you would not want a linking vowel after u, but in literary metamor you do actually have it. That is lu sho. But you find very often people will write it without the and in a lot of dialects it is very clearly without the So there's some variance here, but this is the standard form. Good. After 11, it works after, it follows the exact same pattern. So I think we can skip this. Lat ikumshe, lat kokumshe, lat kumshe, lat lilmshe, lat isumshe, lat kudumshe, lat shimshe, lat kandashimshe, lat indeshimshe. So, and when we look at the multiples of 10, it's also formed by exactly the same principle. So kolo is kolumsho, kumlo is kumlumsho, nilla is nillumshe. I have something to say about this in a moment, and vitle becomes vitlumshe. So nillumshe, here you have to be careful, because think of what the ordinal form of 4 was. That was nillumshe with a single L. But here we have the nillumshe with a geminate L. And this is the traditional example with which length distinction in Mari vowel consonants is shown. But you only have you only have length distinction at morpheme boundaries as you have here. Because these are, of course, these are just like the ones as we saw last week, I believe. It's originally kok lu, kum lu, nul lu, vich lu, 5 tens and such. Okay, and an orthographic convention that you should know. So if we have like kokumsho the 2nd or kolo nilumshe the 24th, in writing, the Mars will often write this as a 2-sho, 24-she. So this is the short form of it, like the English th, rd, and whatnot. But just like in English, you have to know what the appropriate ending is, so that you write first as one st and not one rd or something like that. You have to know what the vowel harmonic ending of a number is to write it the short form like this. Okay. Words and words usage. We're meeting the calendar. Here it is good to remember the more one comp-sci lingo. Yeah, I've seen it. And this is also something one has to make when one has to implement this when one does language technology for Mari. That how these are to be generated and such. Okay, so the month names, mostly the Maris, they mostly use the international names, and here it is good to remember again the more Greek connection that many things in Russia have, that the names are more reminiscent of Greek forms than of Latin names. So we have like Decabre, where we have December and the such. Here often the question comes in my classes, do the Maris also have own names for their months? And yes, they do. But the problem here is with the Mari calendar is that the Maris did not traditionally use a 12-month calendar. They instead use a calendar that, unless I am completely mistaken, had usually 14 months a year that would really follow that would really attempt to follow lunar cycles. And when then the Mars switched to the international 12-month calendar, you had a problem that, for example, there's a Mari celebration that happens around the new year in for us. The Shorek Yol, it's called. That's sheep leg, the feast of the sheep's leg, or the sheep leg. And there would have been Shorek Yol Tilze, the sheep leg month, that spans the 2 weeks before and after this event, that is just at our new year. So now we switch to the international calendar here. And then there's a question, okay, which one becomes, if you want to use your old names, which one becomes Shorek Yol Tilze, December or January? Because the old Shorek Yol Tilze is spread out over both of these. And I have somewhere once read like anecdotes about how in the early days it would be like Mars would agree of, yeah, let's have a meeting on the 12th of Shorek Yol Tilze. Great. Which Shorek Yol Tilze, December or January? And under these circumstances, the traditional Mari folk calendar did not survive in broad usage. In recent years, there has been an attempt to reintroduce a Mari calendar where you have these own names for the months. I've given it to you here, but it is good to be aware of this, but often the Mari, it finds limited usage among the Maris. that many Maoris will not be, they'll know these names, but they won't be sure then if Surem Tilse is July or August or whatnot. And of course, a calendar where people are not sure what months a name refers to is limited in usage. Okay. Then I want to introduce you to a derivational suffix an, which we are going to meet over and over again. This is a highly productive suffix meaning having something. It's in some contexts it can be compared to English e. So if I have like yr rainy, yr rain, yuran is rainy. If I have lum, snow, luman is snowy. And if I have keche, sun, kechan is sunny. And here you see the exact same process that we had with the infinitive before, that we have a suffix starting with a, it deletes a final unstressed a if we have it. But the suffix is way more productive than its the English counterpart I gave. This is analogous then again to the Turkic languages, because l and whatever the cognate forms in different Turkic languages is productive in much the same way. We can also have like erge son and can have ergan, having a son, besunned or something like that. Sounds stupid if I try to do this in English, but in Mari it works fine with a son. And I could also have vich cherle yocha, 5 sick children, and I could have vich cherle yochan, like having 5 sick children. So it's good to this suffix to know that it can be attached to whole phrases. Okay, and in briefly still revisiting den, as I mentioned, this has its roots in a postposition, because if I have like Sergei dene kutarem, I am talking with Sergei. This dene is a postposition with. And this was then grammaticalized as Sergei, den, like Yelu, Sergei, and Yelu. This is again a very vulgar comma thing that also like in Tatar, unless I'm mistaken, Belan, with is also used as and in Udmurt, the instrumental ending is also used as a coordinating element, unless I'm mistaken. In which case, Rika and Zoli can correct me. Yeah, and this is just helps to remember why we, if we have Yelud and Sergei and Yochashtulo, why we have only the genitive at the ending of the whole thing. That we're treating this whole thing as one noun phrase, and we only use the genitive ending once. Okay, that gets us then to the text. Unless there are any questions still pertaining to the grammar or the words. Okay, then. Okay, I'm not entirely sure if I managed to share my screen with audio now, because I now have tied in audio of a native speaker reading this. Let's try and see. Could you hear that?
No.
No.
Okay. No, let me see.
Yeludin Sergey.
What about now?
Yes, that works.
Great. Okay, so the audio recordings that we have in these materials, there are 3 Mari native speakers that represent 3 different generations that we have on them. We have one person who was born in the 30s, we have one person who was born in the 50s, and we have one person who is younger than me and was born in the 80s. This is now, you can probably tell from the voices who is who. This is now the speaker who was born in the 80s. And sometimes if you have a sharp ear to it, you can hear some notices, notice some differences in the exact pronunciation between the younger speakers and older speakers. Okay, so I'm now going to do it that I'm going to let the native speaker read the sentence and then ask somebody from the audience to translate it.
Елуден Сергей Йошкар-Олаш тыйлат.
Kelvin?
Yelu and Sergey live in Yoshkar-Ola.
Okay. Right.
Елуден Сергей. Елуден Сергей Йошкар-Олаш тыйлат. Нуна эшпа юремыште латкокымшо номеран пӧртыштӧ илат. Сергей кумло...
Sonia?
They live in the Espai Street in the house number 12.
Yes. Where I think I already mentioned doesn't actually exist. Espai Street exists, but there is no house number 12 in it, which broke my word broke apart when I realized this in 2014. Okay, then Samo, the next one.
Сергей кумлышем яш.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Sergey is 37 years old.
Yeah. I'm going to try this one more time. I have the feeling I'm too clumsy for this today, but let's see.
Сергей кумлышем яш. Тудо редакцийыште пашам ышта.
Valentina?
So he works in a newspaper, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Editorial office or so.
Editorial office.
Тудо журналист.
Yuka?
He's a journalist.
Mm-hmm.
Елу тудын ватыже кумло вич ияш.
Zoe?
What is vatije?
Vata is wife.
Aha. Yelu, his wife, is 35 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Тудо университетыште Мари Елмым туныкта.
Sandra?
She teaches the Mari language at the university.
Mm-hmm.
Тудо туныктышо.
Luan?
She's a teacher.
Yep.
Елудын Сергейын кок йочашт уло. Эрге ден ӱдыр.
Mikke?
Yelud and Sergey have 2 children, a son and a daughter.
Okay. I managed it a few times and now you just clicked a split centimeter away and I went to the next slide. Let's see if I find it again.
Эргыштын лӱмжӧ Эчан.
Wow. Sophus?
The name of the son is Echan.
Mm-hmm. And I hope everybody can see the segmentation here. We have ergesten, erge, the stem, st, the possessive suffix, in the genitive ending.
Тудо латныл ияш.
Gopal?
He is 14 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Тудо школышто тунемеш.
Kelvin?
He goes to school. He literally learns at school.
Exactly.
Эргыштын лӱмжӧ Эчан. Тудо латныл ияш. Тудо школышто тунемеш. Ӱдырыштын лӱмжӧ Ануш.
Sonia?
The name of the daughter is Anush.
Mm-hmm.
Тудо вич ияш.
Samo?
She's 5 years old.
Yeah.
Тудо йочасадыш коштеш.
Valentina?
She goes to kindergarten.
Mm-hmm. And then Yuka gets the proverb, which is
Калык мут. Книга илаш туныкта. Елу
Book teaches you to live.
exactly. Can't say anything more about the deeper meaning of it, I'm afraid. Okay, so I think Yeah, so what Samo says that the final unstressed O are very reduced and unrounded Russian-like. Yeah. I don't know how much that is because of just the generational differences that we have and how much it might be about dialectal factors. The last speaker that we heard, she is a native speaker who grew up in Yoshkaola, which is very unusual because usually Maoris that grow up in Yoshkaola don't learn Maori at all. And her mother is a Hill Maori. So she learned Maori from the general media, but she also maybe got some Hill Maori influence from her mother's side. And in Hill Maori, final unstressed E O Ö is completely reduced to a reduced vowel, just a she's also dropping the roundedness of her vowels a little bit, although not as much as the singer last time. Yeah. Yeah. Next week, the text next week is going to have a different. We'll have speakers of the older generations, where from the 1930s and 1950s, and also from a different dialect. And will be interesting to see how you feel about the differences there with the final unstressed vowels. Okay, I think we lost so much time to technical difficulties this time, but people are starting to have to leave, and I also still had other plans today, so I think we're gonna skip the exercises this time. But if you want to work on them on your own, you can, and you can compare them with the exercise key, and you can also ask questions in the Discord. I'm going to stop the recording now. A moment.